Sarah stood quietly near the polished coffin, comforting her little boy while whispers buzzed like angry bees. Yet she kept her shoulders straight and her heart steady. The church smelled of lilies and wet umbrellas, and every shoe squeak felt louder than thunder to Sarah's nervous ears. A tall aunt she barely knew clicked her tongue and said Sarah's black dress looked too plain for a widow, making the little boy grip his mother's hand tighter because he could feel the sting in the words. Another cousin muttered that Sarah should not even stand near the casket since she was just the girl from the small rental house John married during college, and their judgment floated like smoke that burned her eyes. The minister cleared his throat to start the service, but a row of older relatives kept peering over their glasses at Sarah as if she did not belong in the front row with the real family. Sarah's cheeks flushed, yet she squeezed her son's fingers and whispered that they would get through the day together because courage often hides inside quiet people who refuse to bend. When the choir began a slow hymn, someone behind her mumbled that the song choice was wrong and hinted Sarah must have picked it without understanding tradition, and the words pierced deeper than the sad melody. Her son, Caleb, only 10, leaned against her side so firmly that she imagined herself as a shield made of quiet steel, and in that picture Caleb was safe behind her calm eyes. The stained glass windows cast colored patches on the floor, and in one patch of light Caleb's tear-streaked face glowed red and gold, reminding Sarah of autumn leaves that hold beauty even while they fall. A gray-haired uncle coughed and said John had married beneath him, as if love were measured by money, not laughter. Sarah wanted to shout that John laughed loudest when Caleb told jokes at breakfast, and that love lived in their cramped kitchen beside burnt toast. But she bit her lip because funerals punish honest voices. The minister spoke of peace beyond sorrow, yet a distant relative interrupted to correct a date about John's first job, glaring at Sarah as if she had poisoned the memory with ignorance. Caleb's small shoulders trembled, so Sarah placed his favorite marble in his palm, the cloudy blue one John won for him at a fair, and the boy traced its swirl until his breathing slowed. The cool glass felt smooth, grounding him. A cluster of cousins nodded toward Sarah's simple shoes and whispered that she should have worn the designer heels John bought for formal dinners, ignoring the fact that the heels hurt her feet. Sarah remembered how John teased her sandals were more adventurous than glossy pumps and loved her anyway, but that memory felt too soft to raise against hard stairs. Rain tapped the roof, and the harsh comments marched like wet boots across her patience. An aunt tugged the sleeve of Sarah's coat and asked if she would move aside for the legal wife side of the family, forgetting that Sarah was legally married to John for 15 faithful years. Sarah looked the aunt in the eye and said nothing, and a flickering candle reflected on stained glass, painting shifting halos that reminded her even flawed people sometimes stand in borrowed light. Caleb squeezed Sarah's hand again and asked in a whisper if the people thought they were invisible, and Sarah answered softly that sometimes good people shine so bright others look away. The funeral director signaled for final viewing, and the crowd shifted like dark waves. Someone murmured that Sarah should wait at the back since she was not proper society, letting the insult float between him verses. Sarah guided Caleb to the casket, lifting him so he could place a paper crane on John's chest. A cousin scoffed that paper cranes were childish, not dignified, yet Sarah remembered John promising Caleb they would visit Japan one day, and the crane was the boy's dream folded into farewell. The minister invited memories, but several relatives glared until Sarah stayed seated, as though her words carried no worth. A man with a gold watch praised John's business and hinted the marriage was a youthful mistake, and the listeners nodded. While stories of lavish parties filled the air, no one mentioned the nights John read bedtime books aloud in funny voices. The nephew shifted, maybe puzzled that Sarah's calm gaze held no shame, only the weight of truths none of them bothered to learn. The rain, relentless now, washed color from the stained glass onto the aisle, turning stone-gray floors into a river of moving jewels. Caleb's marble rolled, clacking against a pew. Everyone stared as though a crime occurred, but Sarah simply picked it up, and Caleb's small laugh bubbled up as she handed it back. A grandmotherly figure hissed that children should be kept still, and Sarah nearly replied that grief never follows rules, but she swallowed the remark like bitter medicine. The minister gave the final blessing, but tension lingered like thin ice over deep sorrow. She recognized that noise is the sound of history reshaping itself, rewriting footnotes that once erased her name. A cousin whispered again about Sarah's lack of refinement, forgetting that true refinement lies in treating others with kindness, not in lace gloves or measured vowels. The organ hummed, and someone muttered that Sarah would need financial help to manage alone. She pictured the envelope again, its crisp corners promising justice couched in legal words. She led Caleb to the lobby, where more relatives crowded around condolences, watching her walk. An uncle asked if Sarah would return a cleaning motel room since money would be tight, dripping false concern. She replied softly that her skills included balancing household budgets on hope and teaching Caleb fractions with cookie pieces, neither of which required pity. Umbrellas popped open like dark blossoms, and Sarah felt cool raindrops mixed with tears she no longer tried to hide. She felt words crowding behind her teeth, but she kept them jailed, certain the right moment to speak would come later. Each drop felt like the sky, telling her secrets would soon be washed clean, leaving room for something new to grow. Before stepping into the drizzle, she promised Caleb that even if the world tried to shrink them, they would stretch toward the light. She pictured bright mornings ahead where Caleb would laugh without echoing scorn and felt the promise bloom warm inside her chest. Sarah met John on a late spring afternoon when the college library smelled like old paper and fresh rain, and he offered her the last seat near the window before starting an easy conversation about favorite comic books. He laughed when she confessed comics taught her big words like incessant, and that tiny confession became their first private joke that lasted years. She was studying childcare while working evenings at a diner, and John, who came from a well-known family, found her ambition refreshing, telling her he admired how she balanced trays and textbooks without dropping either. They shared milkshakes during study breaks, laughing over ordinary jokes, and Sarah felt seen in a way no one in her small hometown had ever made her feel. John's friends teased him at first, saying the waitress was a phase, but he grinned and replied that real love does not check price tags, which made Sarah's cheeks burn happily. After graduation, they rented a tiny apartment above a bakery that woke them every dawn with sweet smells, and though the floor creaked, it became the soundtrack of their early marriage. Sarah found a job at Little Steps Daycare, teaching toddlers to count with color blocks, while John started at his uncle's firm, determined to prove himself beyond the family name. Money was tight, yet they treated each Friday like a holiday, buying one small pizza and watching old adventure movies on a second-hand laptop balanced on stacked books. When Caleb was born, their world shrank to gentle feedings and sleepless giggles, and John called him their pocket-sized miracle even when diapers and bills piled high. John's parents visited once, bringing expensive gifts and worried looks at the peeling wallpaper, but Sarah saw pride in John's eyes when he showed them the hand-painted growth chart on Caleb's bedroom door. Over time, John's work hours grew longer, and Sarah added babysitting in the evenings, singing lullabies to Caleb and the neighbor's twins while writing grocery lists on the back of mail envelopes. They promised to tackle stress like teammates, pressing their palms together every morning and saying, side by side, a pledge that felt simple yet magical. When John received his first big bonus, he surprised Sarah with a day trip to the beach, where they built a crooked sandcastle that Caleb insisted was a dragon's lair guarding fortune. On the drive home, they agreed they did not need fancy cars or club memberships, only enough to keep building small adventures that fit inside photo albums and bedtime stories. John's relatives, however, kept mailing party invitations with gold trim and sideways comments about moving to a better neighborhood, which sounded like code for leaving Sarah's memories behind. Sarah answered each invitation politely, but kept her focus on Caleb's science projects and saving for a used family car that would not stall at traffic lights. She and John laughed over cartoons at breakfast, marking bills paid with bright stickers because tiny celebrations help heavy weeks feel lighter. Years slipped by, and though John sometimes wore expensive suits to meetings, he still folded laundry with Sarah on quiet Sundays, turning socks into puppets to make Caleb giggle. One winter, Sarah caught the flu and felt guilty for resting, but John brought soup every evening, reading aloud silly poems until her fever broke, proving patience is a powerful kind of wealth. When Caleb started third grade, Sarah volunteered for field trips, guiding packs of chatterbox kids through museums, and John always texted funny riddles for her to read on the bus ride home. They held garage sales each spring, clearing toys Caleb outgrew, and donated half the earnings to the food bank, teaching their son that generosity can grow even in small yards. John's relatives rarely visited their modest townhouse, yet Sarah sent holiday cards with hand-drawn stars and kind notes because she believed bridges should be offered even when few crossed them. One year, John's grandmother invited them to a formal dinner. Sarah borrowed a simple navy dress from a friend, but at the table someone mistook her for catering staff, and John calmly corrected them without raising his voice. After that night, Sarah learned to recognize polite sneers hidden behind compliments, and she practiced turning insults into invisible bubbles that floated away before reaching her feelings. She set an example for Caleb by greeting everyone with the same cheerful tone, explaining that etiquette is just kindness and practice steps. John received a promotion that tripled his hours but also his pay, and he placed every bonus letter in a tin box labeled Family Dreams, promising the contents would one day buy a real backyard for Caleb. They visited open houses on weekends for fun, raiding kitchens like food critics, and laughing over giant bathtubs they could almost swim in, never minding agents who eyed Sarah's thrift store coat. Sarah baked cinnamon rolls for John's office party, carrying them on a tray wrapped in a checkered towel, and employees raved more about the rolls than the catered entree, boosting her quiet confidence. Caleb's 10th birthday party featured cardboard pirate hats and a treasure hunt drawn in marker across the backyard, and even the neighbor's dog joined the crew, proving imagination outranks luxury. That summer, John taught Caleb to ride a bike, letting go after 5 wobbly seconds. Sarah cheered so loud a curtain twitched in a rich neighbor's window, but she did not care. They spent evenings planning a road trip to see national parks, marking a map with stickers shaped like stars. The work delays kept pushing the dream farther into the calendar. When John finally booked the vacation, an urgent project postponed it again. He promised Caleb the wait would make the adventure sweeter, and Sarah squeezed his hand to show she believed too. Life felt busy, but not broken, until John's sudden illness struck like lightning on a clear day, leaving hospital monitors to beep where once family jokes had echoed. Sarah stayed by his bed reading his favorite hero stories, pausing whenever John coughed to wipe his brow, while relatives paced the hallway, discussing medical costs as if kindness charged interest. Caleb drew pictures of their planned road trip and taped them to the wall, each crayon line a rope pulling hope closer, and John kissed the drawings every morning. When doctors suggested experimental treatment, John agreed despite risks, whispering to Sarah that if courage were measured, he learned it from watching her persevere through daily storms. The treatment helped for a while, enough for one last picnic in the city park where they tossed a frisbee under white oak branches and promised more days like that would come soon. But the next relapse was harsher, filling their nights with alarms and pale dawns, and Sarah found herself counting blessings like pebbles so she would not lose them in the flood of fear. Eventually, John asked Sarah to meet the family lawyer, explaining with steady eyes that he wanted to insure Caleb and she could dream without limits, no matter who doubted them. Sarah listened, heart aching, yet grateful for his foresight, and she signed papers with hands that trembled but did not break because love can brace even shaking bones. She promised John she would keep living fully, stretching every sunrise into an adventure Caleb could remember, and John smiled faintly, saying that was the best medicine he could imagine. After the rain-soaked procession reached the cemetery, Sarah watched as umbrellas formed a black forest around the open grave, and cold mud splashed her shoes where the pallbearers lowered the casket. The minister's prayer floated away on the wind, but the sharp comments of relatives clung like burrs to Sarah's coat until she imagined plucking each cruel barb off and dropping it into the mud where it belonged. Caleb handed his mother a daisy he picked from the edge of the path, and Sarah placed it on the polished lid, whispering that simple flowers sometimes speak louder than marble angels. While the crowd shuffled toward parked cars, an aunt exclaimed loudly that it was a shame John never fixed Sarah's crooked smile with braces, as though grief required perfection to be valid. Another cousin joked that Sarah probably could not afford proper headstone engraving and offered unsolicited business cards, turning sympathy into a sales pitch that left Caleb frowning in confusion. A sleek limo door opened, revealing John's parents sheltered in leather seats. His mother beckoned Sarah over only to hand her a single wilted rose and remind her the reception was adults only. Sarah, lips numb, thanked her and guided Caleb to a taxi instead, deciding hot chocolate at home would comfort a child better than forkfuls of pity served on fine china. The taxi driver, noticing her damp dress and red eyes, turned off the meter for the first mile and hummed an old lullaby, proving strangers can practice bigger kindness than blood can manage. Back at the townhouse, Sarah heated milk while Caleb changed into pajamas, and the quiet kitchen felt like a peaceful island after the storm of judgment outside. Its presence was like a drumbeat she both feared and trusted. On the table lay the lawyer's envelope John entrusted to her. Its seal remained unbroken because Sarah wanted to respect the timeline John had planned. Caleb asked whether his father would like them to read a bedtime story, and Sarah nodded, choosing the space adventure book John started 2 weeks earlier in the hospital. She read aloud, her voice occasionally wavering, and let Caleb fall asleep on the couch, clutching the marble and dreaming of rocket ships beyond sorrow. Only then did she open the envelope, revealing a letter in John's neat handwriting explaining where to meet the next morning and why she should arrive confident despite anyone's doubts. The document also contained a small fold-out treasure map John drew for Caleb, promising a surprise if the boy followed clues after school. She tucked the map into her purse, deciding adventure would honor grief better than tears. Morning arrived with pale sunshine, and Sarah dressed in the navy borrowed dress, smoothing its wrinkles with a steam kettle, because there was no time for doubts. She packed Caleb's lunchbox with star-shaped sandwiches and a note that read, "Adventure awaits, brave captain," sealing it with a sticker of a rocket. At school drop-off, other parents stared at her puffy eyes, but she straightened her back and thanked the crossing guard warmly, refusing to broadcast pain like a headline. The lawyer's office occupied the top floor of a glass tower downtown, its polished lobby echoing with clipped heels. She started counting ceiling lights to slow her racing heartbeat and reached 42 before her name was called. Soon John's relatives arrived in a tight cluster, expensive perfume trailing behind, and they filled the room with stage sighs and smug whispers about trust funds defending true family heritage. An uncle gestured for Sarah to sit in the corner like a misbehaving student, but she remained where she was, hands clasped, remembering John's advice to stay rooted. The attorney, Mr. Grant, invited everyone into a conference room paneled with dark wood, where a silver pitcher of water sat centered like a peace offering no one trusted. Before reading the will, he asked if refreshments were needed, and a cousin scoffed that they had no time for niceties since assets required careful guardianship. Mr. Grant adjusted his glasses and began reading, his steady voice slicing through anticipation as he outlined charitable donations that surprised many listeners. Sarah breathed the word scholarship like it was honey melting on her tongue. He detailed scholarships in Caleb's name for children who loved space science, causing Sarah's breath to hitch with pride, while a relative rolled eyes at wasted money. Next, he announced that John's personal savings, stocks, and life insurance will be placed in a trust managed solely by Sarah until Caleb's 21st birthday. A thin gasp rippled around the table, and someone muttered that such responsibility would overwhelm a woman who once worked babysitting jobs, dismissing her in the same breath. Sarah kept her gaze on the legal text, tracing each printed letter in her mind like steps across a bridge John built for them. Mr. Grant then declared ownership of the lakeside cabin, the townhouse, and a significant share in the family firm were transferred immediately to Sarah as primary beneficiary. Another wave of shocked murmurs broke, like glassware rattling in a sudden quake, and necklaces shifted as half the room turned to stare at Sarah with wide, unblinking eyes. One aunt loudly protested, claiming John had once promised the cabin for family reunions, but the lawyer produced a notarized amendment signed after that supposed promise. The uncle who questioned Sarah's job prospects demanded evidence of her financial skill, and Mr. Grant calmly revealed a sealed letter John wrote, praising her budget talents and foresight. John's parents whispered fiercely, but outsiders could still hear phrases like irresponsible choice and ruining our family image, highlighting how quickly grief can transform into greed. Sarah felt heat climb her neck but inhaled slowly, recalling the breathing exercise Caleb's teacher taught for test stress, proving wisdom can come from children's classrooms. Mr. Grant concluded the reading with a personal note from John, thanking his relatives for attending and reminding them that love shaped his decisions more than tradition ever did. Any challenge would redirect funds to charity. Silence hung heavy. Even perfume seemed to pause midair, and Sarah noticed the steady tick of the wall clock sounding louder than the heartbeat in her ears. Finally, the cousin who sold business cards at the grave stood up, forced a smile, and congratulated Sarah while avoiding eye contact, as though courtesy burned his tongue. Others offered half-formed congratulations, stumbling over the word heiress, which stuck like gum, refusing to roll smoothly off practiced tongues. Sarah nodded politely, thanked Mr. Grant, and gathered her papers, feeling like she carried not just legal documents but proof that loyalty and kindness sometimes win long races. She walked past the stony group, hearing their whispers fade behind glass doors, and stepped into sunlight that felt warmer now that truth had cleared gray clouds of doubt. The glass hallway ahead glittered like a victory arch, reflecting her next steps beside bright sky, and she murmured a thank you she was sure John would somehow hear. Leaving the tower, Sarah's phone buzzed with messages from numbers that once ignored her birthdays but now overflowed with polite invitations to lunch. She pictured those digital words fluttering away like startled pigeons. She muted the device, deciding the next voice she wanted to hear was Caleb's, not distant relatives reciting sudden affection like actors reading unfamiliar lines. She imagined each alert as a paper plane sailing straight into the trash. Outside the school gate, Caleb ran toward her, waving the treasure map and shouting he had solved the first clue during recess with help from his best friend Leo. Sarah knelt to hug him, inhaling the dusty scent of playground sand and feeling the heaviness of the day dissolve for a blessed moment. They followed the map to the community park, where Clue 2 was taped under their favorite bench, instructing Caleb to count steps to the tallest oak that held secret number 3. At the oak tree, they discovered a tin box buried beneath fresh soil. Inside lay a note from John saying real treasure starts as shared memories, plus 2 movie vouchers for the local theater. Caleb laughed, saying Dad's handwriting still looked like excited ants racing, and Sarah promised they would use the tickets for the new space film Saturday night. On the walk home, Sarah explained with careful words how the lawyer meeting went, emphasizing that Dad trusted them both with important choices because love does that. Caleb nodded seriously, declaring that guardianship sounded like being captain of a spaceship, steering through meteors of grown-up problems with bravery and snacks. They celebrated by making grilled cheese shaped like stars, and Sarah let Caleb sprinkle extra cheese because tiny luxuries can mark big milestones. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang, revealing the cousin who had mocked paper cranes now holding a bouquet of roses large enough to hide behind. He offered condolences wrapped in rehearsed concern, suggesting a family advisor could help Sarah navigate investments, but she politely declined. His words tumbled like marbles on polished floors, shiny yet difficult to catch. Undeterred, he praised her resilience, a word he once spelled with sarcasm, and hinted at weekend retreats for refined networking, yet Sarah's calm smile never wavered. After he left, Caleb asked if that cousin was friend or foe, and Sarah answered that sometimes people change masks depending on who they think holds the tickets. Caleb drew a comic strip of a superhero mom blocking greedy villains with a shield labeled kindness, and Sarah placed it on the fridge like a medal of honor. Evenings settled with gentle cricket songs, and Sarah opened John's budget journal, discovering encouraging notes beside columns of numbers, as if he were coaching her from beyond. He had outlined savings goals, emergency funds, and a schedule for charity donations, reminding her to blend wisdom with generosity like colors on a palette. Encouraged, she drafted a list of priorities: securing Caleb's future, fixing their leaky roof, donating to the daycare reading program, and planning that long-promised road trip. She researched trusted financial planners online, bookmarking firms that valued transparency over prestige, and pressed send on interview requests with steady fingers. A notification chimed. John's parents requested a meeting, insisting family unity required shared decision-making, yet Sarah replied that unity starts with respect. That night, she tucked Caleb into bed and read the next chapter of the space adventure, pausing whenever he asked if astronauts miss home the way they miss Dad. After closing the book, she whispered that missing someone can be like starlight, still shining even when the source is moved far away, a thought Caleb found comforting. Downstairs, Sarah brewed herbal tea and studied the will again, highlighting clauses that protected Caleb's college fund from any contest, grateful for John's thoroughness. She planned to meet Mr. Grant again to clarify tax implications, determined not to stumble into traps of ignorance others expected. A late email from the daycare director arrived, praising Sarah's past work and inviting her to design a new literacy outreach, saying her leadership mattered more than donations. She realized inheritance was more than money. It was an opportunity to honor John by extending kindness outward. She added notes about puppet shows and interactive murals. Before bed, she checked social media, finding posts from relatives painting her as heroic or irresponsible. She logged off to protect her peace. In a quiet corner of her journal, she wrote, "Measure worth by actions, not applause," underlining it twice. She also listed simple joys to preserve: Saturday pancakes, library visits, and porch stargazing with Coco, because wealth should never drown small rituals. The next morning dawned crisp. Sarah jogged with Caleb to school, turning the run into a playful race that ended in laughter and grass stains. Returning home, she found a glossy envelope from a luxury estate agent promoting seaside villas, addressed to Mrs. Sarah, beneficiary, evidence her new status traveled faster than her grief. She tossed the flyer into recycling, amused at how the world chases fortunes like moths chase porch lights, often ignoring the people holding them. Her reply to John's parents now included a gentle reminder that respect leaves no room for contempt. Midday, she met a soft-spoken financial planner who explained compound interest with jelly bean diagrams, impressing Sarah with clear teaching skills. The planner applauded her decision to involve Caleb gradually, suggesting games that turned saving and giving into adventures, and Sarah felt relief in finding an ally rather than a salesman. Afterward, she treated herself to the diner milkshake she once shared with John, the creamy sweetness tasting like yesterday's joy blended with tomorrow's promise. An elderly couple overheard her phone conversation about scholarships and donated their unused movie passes to Caleb, starting a kindness loop that made Sarah's smile widen. She and Caleb later arranged extra funeral flowers into small bouquets for a charity store, leaving color in places often overlooked. Before dinner, Sarah practiced saying no politely in the mirror, preparing for persuasion attempts from relatives certain entitlement grows with family trees. Caleb interrupted with a riddle about planets, proving curiosity remains alive even when life pivots sharply, and together they turned the kitchen into a mini solar system using fruit. She tucked the budget journal beside her pillow and drifted to sleep dreaming of open roads, starlit campsites, and a future shaped by choices she would make boldly yet kindly. 2 days later, Sarah agreed to meet John's parents and several relatives at the lakeside cabin she now owned, wearing her favorite forest green sweater, the one John said brought out the bravery in her eyes. The cabin, surrounded by pine trees and mirror-still water, held echoes of past family summers, yet nerves pricked as luxury cars lined the gravel driveway. Inside, sunlight streamed through tall windows, glinting off polished oars mounted on the wall, while distant loon calls punctuated the tense air. John's mother greeted Sarah with a fragile hug before guiding her to the rustic dining table, where folders and pens sat ready like soldiers awaiting orders. Caleb explored the dock under the watchful eye of Mr. Hernandez, whom Sarah invited as neutral supervisor, a decision that already felt wise. The meeting began with polite tea pours, but soon Uncle claimed certain assets rightfully belonged to the founding bloodline, using words like legacy and stewardship. Sarah listened, recalling John's view that legacy should lift others, not lock them out, and she asked him to cite specific legal grounds rather than traditions. He hesitated, turning pages without answers, and Mr. Grant, present by video call, calmly reiterated the penalty clause redirecting funds to charity if challenges arose. A cousin proposed splitting management, suggesting Sarah lacked the network to expand property value. She responded with research on ecotourism and community programs. She unveiled a plan to host seasonal science camps for kids at the cabin, using kayaking to teach physics and stargazing to nurture curiosity, mirroring John's dream. John's father remarked that noble, but profit mattered. Sarah countered that responsible ventures often outperform pure luxury rentals, citing studies linking ethics to higher bookings. The room fell silent until pine scent drifted in, and a chickadee song reminded everyone that loud opinions do not equal wise ones. Ann tried emotional appeal, saying family photos would look strange beside strangers, but Sarah offered weekly open-house breakfasts where stories could mingle. The idea disarmed several relatives, yet the persistent cousin asked what percentage of revenue they would receive. Sarah answered calmly that revenue would circle into scholarships and upkeep. Mr. Grant displayed projected budgets showing sustainable margins, and Caleb wandered in as a graph appeared, whispering the rising green line looked like a trail they could hike. Relatives chuckled despite themselves, tension easing as genuine enthusiasm slipped past guarded hearts. John's mother wiped a tear, saying she did not want to lose contact with Caleb, and Sarah promised open invitations as long as respect remained the entry ticket. The skeptical uncle muttered until Mr. Hernandez offered to teach him fishing knots, diffusing grumble with unexpected courtesy. Talks concluded with signatures on Sarah's terms, and the penalty clause remained untouched, guarding charitable goals like a sentinel. Relatives dispersed. Sarah joined Caleb on the dock where he pointed at ripples, saying they looked like questions traveling until answers touched them. She told him meetings are like stones dropped in water. Some cause big splashes, others gentle waves, but each changes the surface. His eyes shone with understanding. That evening they hosted a cookout, corn on the cob, grilled veggies, and esmores, letting memories rebuild around flames instead of threats. Cousins who once whispered now praised Caleb's marshmallow tower engineering, and barriers melted sweeter than chocolate on warm graham crackers. John's father shared a story about teaching his son to canoe. Tears glistened, and he thanked Sarah for protecting spaces where laughter could echo again. Sarah handed out volunteer sign-up sheets for the camp. Many relatives surprised themselves by writing names down. As the sky turned violet, the first evening star appeared, and Sarah asked everyone to name a wish. Most wished for harmony. Back in the kitchen, she packed leftovers for a shelter. Teaching Caleb abundance becomes meaningful when shared. He added 2 extra esmores to the bag. After guests left, they sat on the porch swing, talking about constellations and how connections draw pictures across dark space. She imagined each scholarship like a small boat launching into future seas. Caleb suggested naming the camp after John's favorite hero, and Sarah agreed, picturing a bright logo on canoe paddles next summer. She emailed the daycare director about partnerships, envisioning busloads of eager kids arriving, each curiosity a spark that could light new paths. Before bed, she updated her spreadsheet, pledges forming a ladder toward adventures. She thanked John in her journal, hoping he felt proud. A gentle breeze rustled curtains as she drifted to sleep, dreaming of kayaks slicing sunrise pink water and Caleb's laughter beneath tall pines. Morning coffee tasted like possibility, They paddled across the calm lake, spotting a heron gliding low, its wings wide like an invitation forward. Mid-paddle, Sarah's phone vibrated with an alert approving her scholarship fund, and she let out a joyful shout that startled the heron but delighted Caleb. Returning to shore, they planned a presentation for the town council, determined to secure grants for trail upgrades benefiting visitors and wildlife. Caleb practiced his speech with a pine cone microphone, and Sarah coached him to speak slowly, teaching leadership one brave sentence at a time. At a craft fair, they commissioned wooden signs carved with stars and waves. The artisan traded volunteer hours instead of money. Driving back, Caleb said generosity feels like a campfire, warm and safe when everyone adds a log, a metaphor Sarah promised to remember. They ended the day drawing a new clue map for future visitors, ensuring John's playful spirit guided others toward hidden joys within pine shadows. She slept that night knowing respect grew where resentment once tangled, and possibilities sang like wind through the trees outside the cabin windows. A month later, Sarah steered their family car onto the highway for the long-awaited road trip, the back seat holding a cooler of snacks and Caleb's notebook labeled Universe Discoveries. Bright banners of summer fields waved outside, and Caleb counted every red barn they passed, his voice a cheerful metronome keeping time with rolling tires. They stopped at a diner decorated with rocket posters. The waitress pinned a paper star on Caleb's jacket, and he saluted like an astronaut commanding ground control. Sarah paid from the travel budget John once labeled Dream Fuel, feeling the phrase ignite fresh joy with every mile. At their first park, cliffs framed a waterfall that roared like applause, and the mist turned them into sparkling silhouettes against the morning sun. They hiked a wildflower trail, and Sarah told stories of how John proposed beside a similar path, making Caleb imagine love blooming among mountain laurel. That night they camped under a sky littered with stars, recording a video for volunteers, repeating Dad's motto, "Adventure needs applause," before zipping into bags scented of hopeful tomorrows. The next morning, they donated microscopes to a ranger station. The ranger promised to inspire thousands of young explorers. Driving onward, Caleb read Galaxy Facts, his excitement filling the car with wonder John's bedtime stories once seated. A call from Mr. Grant confirmed trail grants. Caleb pumped his fist, shouting the heroes can be real and small at the same time. At a desert stop, they planted a memory box beneath stones they painted with comets, sealing it like a time capsule for courage-hungry hearts. Sarah rode inside, "Leave kindness, take courage," and Caleb drew a rocket lifting those words beyond gravity. On a coastal highway, Sarah reflected on how humiliation morphed into empowerment, like a broken shell revealing a pearl. She reminded Caleb that dignity depends on stories you tell with your actions, not fancy suits. At a cliff overlook where whales breached, each splash felt like the ocean applauding resilience, and Sarah clapped along, tears mixing with salty wind. In a museum planetarium, Caleb whispered the stars looked like frozen fireworks celebrating promises kept, and Sarah agreed. They shared pizza, Caleb calculating the tip with new math skills, proud to practice adulthood. A news crew filmed their scholarship story. Sarah insisted they highlight community giving instead of inheritance drama. The segment aired, and texts from strangers pledged donations, turning a single trip into a caravan of goodwill crossing digital highways. At a campground, Sarah wrote thank you emails while Caleb traded astronomy jokes, friendships stitched together by stars. She realized her life now resembled the night sky, vast, connected, dotted with points shaped by kindness. At the final park, they climbed a fire tower at dawn. The breeze smelled of pine and possibility, drumming a tune of brave beginnings. From the top, Caleb declared the horizon the best clue Dad ever left, pointing every direction at once. Sarah laughed, admitting treasure hunts sometimes end by showing new beginnings, and Caleb pocketed a pine needle as souvenir. Descending, they met an elderly couple and offered help, proving leadership lessons rooted deep. The couple gifted Caleb a vintage compass, saying every explorer needs a tool that points to possibility. On the drive home, they sang loud, notes swirling like confetti on the wind until Caleb fell asleep, compass resting on his chest. Night settled as they reached the lakeside cabin, fireflies blinking greetings while water lapped gently, welcoming them home. Sarah laid Caleb on the couch under a quilt John's grandmother made. Patchwork-proof small pieces can warm a life. She stepped onto porch, whispering thanks to John, to courage, to strangers choosing generosity over judgment. She understood inheritance is less about property and more about values planted for the next journeyer to harvest. A shooting star streaked by as if signing her pledge that every penny and plan would honor that truth. She updated her journal, handwriting steady like footsteps on a well-lit path, logging miles traveled, funds pledged, lessons learned. Before bed, she taped the compass next to the fridge comic strip, a gallery of guidance showing kindness and direction work best together. Dawn approached with workshops to design, trails to mark, scholarships to send, but also pancakes to flip and jokes to hear. She drifted asleep certain humiliation had been only a doorway, revealing a landscape wide enough for every dream she and Caleb would dare to chase. Dawn broke over the lake like orange paint spilling across blue glass, and Sarah woke early, knowing today the John Bright Star Science Camp would finally open its doors to curious kids. She trotted down the dock, inhaling pine air that smelled of adventure and wiping dew from the wooden planks so no young camper would slip during the welcome tour. Volunteers arrived in canoes decorated with paper rockets, their paddles splashing tiny diamonds, and each helper wore a badge Caleb had drawn showing a smiling planet giving a thumbs up. Caleb bounced beside her, clutching the vintage compass, promising he would be both navigator and friendly tour guide because heroes can multitask when they eat good breakfast. A rented school bus rumbled up the gravel, releasing 20 campers whose backpacks jingled with water bottles and pocket telescopes, eager faces shining brighter than the rising sun. Sarah greeted every child by name, handing out camp journals stamped with silver stars, reminding them discoveries grow stronger when we write them down before sleep steals the details. Inside the cabin's meeting hall, long tables held magnets, glass beads, and cardboard tubes waiting to become homemade spectroscopes, while volunteer chefs stirred oatmeal that smelled like cinnamon clouds. Sarah tapped a cowbell, and the chatter settled into excited ripples. She introduced the camp mission: learn science, share kindness, and leave the woods cleaner than they found it. Kids practiced the motto by tossing imaginary litter into a pretend recycling bin, loud cheers exploding whenever an invisible soda can made the winning shot. Mr. Hernandez demonstrated knot tying using colored ropes, teaching how red rope over blue rope makes a reliable stopper knot, the same way respect layered over teamwork makes strong friendships. After knots came canoe safety, and Caleb helped fit bright orange vests, explaining that life jackets are hugs from fabric when waves try to be bossy. On the water, children counted paddle strokes to measure distance, discovering math hides in mussels and splashes, not just notebooks and chalk dust. Back on shore, they built tiny catapults from tongue depressors and rubber bands, launching marshmallows toward a target painted like the moon, squeals echoing across cedar trunks. Every bullseye earned the shooter a galactic hero sticker, but Mrs. earned laughter and another try, teaching that mistakes are just rough drafts of tomorrow's triumphs. At lunch, volunteers served sunflower seed sandwiches, and Sarah told a short story about John's first telescope made from leftover mailing tubes, proving creativity can sprout even when wallets feel skinny. A shy camper named Mina whispered she worried about understanding big words, so Sarah translated spectroscopy into rainbow detective work, and Mina's grin stretched wide enough to light the room. Afternoon brought a surprise guest, Professor Vega from the State University, who arrived with a portable planetarium bubble that inflated like a giant blueberry on the field. Inside the dome, stars glowed across the curved ceiling while Professor Vega explained constellations are simply picture puzzles our ancestors drew to remember feelings under enormous skies. Caleb pointed out Orion, proudly telling everyone his dad once compared bravery to that hunter's belt, 3 bright jewels holding up hope against night. The professor invited Sarah to share their scholarship news, and she announced 3 full camp bursaries funded by relatives who traded doubts for donations, applause thundering louder than last night's frogs. After the dome deflated, campers split into teams to design eco-rovers, small cardboard cars powered by rubber band motors, each instructed to rescue a paper animal stranded on mock sand dunes. Team Meteor raced first, their rover wobbling yet finishing the loop, proving balance improves through motion, not waiting on perfect starts. Team Comet added a sail cut from snack wrappers, discovering wind power when a volunteer fanned them with a clipboard, an accidental experiment turning into giggly success. Sarah wandered between tables, praising patience more than speed, because she knew some lessons whisper before they roar, like seeds sprouting under shy soil. During snack break, children decorated gratitude postcards for hospital nurses who once treated John, promising kindness travels farther than rockets if we stamp it with sincerity. A sudden summer shower drummed on the cabin roof, so everyone moved to the craft loft to construct rain gauges from cut plastic bottles, catching droplets like scientists harvesting sky confetti. When the rain stopped, puddles reflected upside-down clouds, and Sarah encouraged campers to jump in them carefully, because exploration sometimes gets muddy, and that is okay. Evening rolled in rosy and gold, and families arrived for open-fire dinner. Cousins who once scoffed at paper cranes now grilled veggie skewers while praising Caleb's program schedule. John's parents donated astronomy books, placing them on a new shelf labeled Dream Fuel Library, and Sarah thanked them, noticing genuine warmth replacing earlier frost. As darkness deepened, lanterns lined the dock, shimmering like captured fireflies, guiding everyone to the night watch platform built from reclaimed lumber and neighborly goodwill. Professor Vega set up a big telescope nicknamed Sky Window, letting each camper peek at Jupiter's swirling storms, the giant planet looking like a marbled marble in space. Mina gasped at the moons dancing around Jupiter and whispered she wanted to code a game about cosmic hopscotch, inspiration sparking like matchsticks in her eyes. Caleb presented his compass to the group, explaining how it once belonged to kind strangers and now lead hearts rather than hikers, a metaphor nobody missed. Sarah announced that tomorrow they would test water purity with strips that change color, comparing results to state data, because real science stands on evidence, not guesses. Parents clapped, cameras flashed, and yet the stars stole the show, glittering so fiercely that kids fell silent, feeling small but important inside the universe's glowing quilt. Warm cocoa appeared in paper cups, carrying cinnamon steam. Sarah raised hers in a toast to wonder, legacy, and fresh starts born from broken expectations. Caleb repeated the camp motto once more, and voices rose together in a chorus of promise, their words floating up to mingle with starlight like hopeful balloons released at a carnival. Goodnights echoed across cabins, screen doors creaked, and Sarah lingered last on the porch, checking tomorrow's lesson plans while crickets stitched the quiet with rhythmic song. She wrote a quick journal line, humiliation planted seeds. Today I watched them bloom into galaxies inside children's eyes, then closed the notebook with a soft, satisfied thump. Lights dimmed, waves lapped, and Sarah finally drifted to sleep knowing the camp and her life were steady rockets fueled by kindness, poised to carry countless dreams beyond every horizon.